Good evening, everyone. I'm Sheila Bryant, the president of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated, Northern Virginia chapter. And our mission is to advocate on the behalf of African American women in the areas of health, education, and economic empowerment. And most of all, we speak for the voiceless. And today, one of our programs, and that we mandated from our national, is to have a webinar or discussion on obesity health issues, specifically surrounding with the COVID-19 and how it impacting African Americans. Specific health issues with high blood pressure, cancer, and other areas of health can stress us out during this specific time. And we are here as an organization to represent African American women and their families, and how that we can eliminate the disparities in health issues. And with a recommendation from Dr. Bathsheba Bryant Tarpey, this is how we have Ms. Tambra Stevenson. And it's a pleasure that you have agreed to do this program. And with that, I will allow Bathsheba to introduce you formally.
Thank you, Madam President. And I just wanted to go over, Tambra is a dear friend, and I am just so excited about all her accomplishments. So I'm going to read you briefly some highlights of her bio, but she has a tremendous amount of accomplishments. Tambra Raye Stevenson is a speaker, trainer, advocate, and author. She's the founder of Native Soul Kitchen and WANDA, which stands for Women Advancing Nutrition, Dietetics, and Agriculture. She truly believes that we need more women to be key drivers in developing solutions to the problems in our food system. In 2014, this fourth generation Oklahoma was featured as a nutrition hero by the Food and Nutrition magazine. And also at that same time, she was the National Geographic Traveler of the Year for finding her Fulani roots in Nigeria to promote the health of African heritage foods, because she really understands that Western foods have really failed us in our health. Prior to that, Tambra spent 10 years of creating and coordinating local and national initiatives to improve health, economic opportunities in the Office of the Secretary at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the U.S. Department of Commerce, D.C. Mayor's Office on Women's Policy and Initiatives, and the University of the District of Columbia's Center for Nutrition. Her work has been highlighted in many venues and media outlets, including the U.S. Library of Congress, Washington Post, National Geographic, as well as WHUR, Black Enterprise, and many others. Under D.C. Mayor Bowser, she serves as on the first ever D.C. Food Policy Council, as well as she also serves as the health chair for the NAACP DC branch. She has spoken at various summits and programs, both internationally and domestically, in Sweden, to South Africa, to Ghana, as well as in our own very backyard at the Smithsonian's Food History Weekend, as well as the Smithsonian's 2020 Earth Optimism Summit. Tambra Raye Stevenson is a graduate of Oklahoma State University and Tufts University School of Medicine, where she has a BS degree in human nutrition, pre-med with a minor in Spanish, and a master's in health communication. She is currently a PhD student in the Department of Communications at American University. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Tambra.
So much, Bathsheba and Sheila, for having me part of this conversation of Sisterhood of the Soul. At this current time, we're in a crisis, and I'll dive more into the presentation today, but I also want to highlight that we have Francilla Keji, who's a part of WANDA, Women Advancing Nutrition, Dietetics, and Agriculture. And so I just want to thank you all for creating this digital space of sisterhood, and how more now than ever, it's an opportunity for us to come together, unite, and heal in our communities, and how food and sisterhood are two powerful ways in which we can do that. So with that said, I want to get started with the presentation. I will share that we are Facebook Live, sharing it to extend and amplify this important message. And so if anyone does not want to be physically present, visually, please shut your camera off and just understand that we are public in our conversation. All right, so I will share my screen. All right. So as today's presentation is Sisterhood of the Soul, Healing Our Meals, a Masterclass. First, to get started, I just wanted to just highlight, this is our agenda for today. And then I also want to start out with just how do we create a sacred space, even on these digital streets. One, that this is a space to learn and grow and share, and that we are here to support and encourage one another and acknowledge the contributions of all of us. And that we're solutions focused at a time where we focus so much on problems. And that digital spaces should just be equally as safe as this physical spaces that we are protesting and marching every day right now, and that we should be listening with a heart and to be balanced with our head, and that this session is being recorded. So beyond the titles and experience that Bathsheba shared, I'm a sister, I'm a mother, I'm a niece, I'm an aunt, I'm a friend, I'm a sister's keeper, I'm a soror, I am WANDA. I've learned through the process of these different roles how it is important to acknowledge the roles and responsibilities we have in shaping sisterhood, and that sometimes even in the midst of sisterhood there can be pain, and when there is pain outside of the sisterhood, it is an opportunity that we can lean on one another, and that it has become a fuel to my purpose, and how food is just a visual flow of what that looks like. As a kid growing up, the first form of sisterhood I saw was in the form of the Babysitter Club book series. I enjoyed the journeys that they had with one another, whether it's creating a garden, visiting someone's home, but the whole idea of sharing and caring for one another, to me, is a powerful thing that we still need today. A little bit more about WANDA. We started in 2016, but the idea really manifested prior in 2015 with validation from women from South Africa, and speaking about, at a time post-apartheid, how do we self-care? How do we support one another? And so understanding that there was a need to be born out of love and a sense of urgency to heal and inspire and engage and inform women and girls on how do we honor the legacy of our ancestors, how do we advocate for healthy food policies, how do we innovate in creating the system that we want to see in the world. And so building a pipeline and a platform is crucial to supporting that new generation of Black women and girls throughout the food system for resilient communities. And so we take a learn by doing approach through this process. So we celebrate our everyday food heroes, whether it's your mama, your auntie, or nana. It doesn't mean you have to be a celebrity chef or a famous New York Times bestselling cookbook author in order to be a WANDA woman or a food hero. And so we're going to dive more in how we're going to work together to support that here in our community in the District of Columbia. Right now, our existence is the resistance. At a time where 2020, we are fighting what we call a syndemic of COVID-19, protesting against police brutality, experiencing the highest levels of unemployment in record history, while still being digitally connected and social distancing. We are still in the same fight as we were 100 years ago. In 1920, my family was in Oklahoma. We had the Tulsa race riots happening in 1921. You had an oil boom happening where oil was key in terms of opportunity and wealth that some were able to take advantage of, some not. You had the first Black woman PhD holder at UPenn. And you also had the lynchings that Ida B. Wells wrote about and fought for with federal legislation advocacy at the time, and a migration to the North for people looking for industrial jobs and economic opportunities. And you had the Red Summers, where towns were devastated, like Boley, where Black Wall Street was birthed, and Rosewood, and so many others throughout the South. And so it's an opportunity to us to recognize that just our mere presence is a form of protest, and the ability to maintain our life is a form of resistance. And so I say that in reshaping our thinking on how we see health and how we see the importance of self-care in this process. We've seen the headlines about COVID-19 and how people are self-medicating with emotional eating, from the alcohol sales skyrocketing to the top orders through Grubhub and other meal delivery programs being the burrito bowls and the French fries. But are these the foods that we need to help sustain us in a time where we have to be fit to fight? And we've also seen the headlines of this next pandemic of racial unrest, prompted by injustice and structural barriers, prompted by police brutality in the country, of just not gaining the due process that our communities deserve, and the same form of justice versus vigilante justice in the hands of corrupt cops. So what do we call this? 2 pandemics or more? It's a syndemic that we're experiencing right now. And as Black women, that's just another layer, as we've seen the most recent cases of more injustice unfolding, whether it's in the workplace or it's in our homes, with domestic violence growth during the time of COVID-19, or if it's fighting the same injustice in the ability to live life and not have any interruptions through our process of living our best life. So I just want to ask, what does sisterhood mean to you? Please share in the comments right down below, because it's an important time to think in this country where individuality has been celebrated, contrast to other parts of the world where collectivism is so crucial. How has that shaped our ability to survive and thrive in the midst of a pandemic, and how has it not? Because what we've seen in this idea of Western individualism, of pulling ourselves by the bootstrap, that it is the collective tribe that is crucial in order to mobilize and unite and come together and survive. So I definitely want to know, what do you have to say about this? Next. Thank you for sharing. We have sisterhood is having someone to work with, lean on with you, and celebrate the triumphs of life. Most definitely, thank you. And so for me, even in my own family, reconnecting to women in my family, I definitely lean on and call on aunties. Aunties of the world are just as important as our mamas and our nanas. And so here is my grandma, Ruby, with my daughter, Ruby, my son, Elliot, and my aunt, Berlinda, in Oklahoma. And so understanding what does sisterhood look like can come in the form of what we see in our own families before we then see it in our actual friendships that we make through school, through work, through the community. And then we have some that are just toxic and not healthy. And so if you've learned a pattern of dysfunction, how do you break that cycle and begin creating new traditions, new patterns that are healing and thriving? So why does sisterhood matter more than ever? There was a UMass Boston study done in 2017 that found that covert racism, which I definitely have seen in the North and experienced, it can come through all sorts of mechanisms. And if you've experienced it, please put it in the chat and share what has covert racism looked like in your life? How has it impacted you? But there's been a direct link between the mental health. There was a Harvard study about weathering that one professor shared, how it impacts literally the telomeres in our body. And that speaks to the generational trauma that is carried on through the DNA into the next generation. We've seen that with the Holocaust and how the same impact has created a dynamic that flows through a generation. And so it takes a special mindset and courage and wherewithal to overcome that, because ultimately it can lead to depression, which reduces productivity, performance, and it also creates anxiety, the panic attacks that we may feel, or the inability to sleep well at night and feel well rested. And it creates trauma, whether that's emotional trauma or physical trauma. I know when I was in grad school at Tufts, I wrote a paper on fibromyalgia and what are the alternative healing practices to that and how can they be triggered, because it was a dynamic that was not classified as a disease at the time, but it was one that I personally have seen and known, and was wondering how in the world can we prevent a situation like this from happening, which is why I've learned to embrace the power of communication. How do we share our stories? How can our stories be healing, be our medicine? And that sisterhood creates that opportunity to share those stories in that circle of sisterhood. So for me, I looked up, what does sisterhood mean? I had the privilege of being a part of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and so that was another means in which I was able to see sisterhood demonstrated. And so that left an invaluable impact in how this sisterhood really can create a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose of service, that when we think about the concept of gangs or crews, people are looking for a sense of belonging and identity and purpose. And so if we can do that in the forms of the sisterhood we create, that can be honest and loyal and dependable and trustworthy, that to me is a healthy form of sisterhood and a bond that grows stronger, that can last a lifetime. So if you agree with this, what does sisterhood mean to you? And how do we sow the seeds of it? Because ultimately, restoring our divine feminine power is at stake. And I say that because early on in my elementary years, I didn't have a sense of sisterhood. I leaned on, became a tomboy, hung out with the guys, and so I identified with male identity. And it also had me question my own identity because of that. Like, how am I able to connect with men or boys at the time, and not so well with girls in my age group? That changed over time and you learn yourself, but I felt very awkward. The awkward Black girl, we've seen the YouTube series, I definitely can relate. And so through the process of, as we grow through life, we're also forming our identities, and how powerful that can be in shaping how we relate to others and most importantly, relate to ourselves. And so the seeds in which we sow are providing the opportunity to create a garden that grows hope, which I call hope is helping other people every day, while also still having optimism and perseverance and enthusiasm on life. Because entheos in Greek is life. So we want to be enthused on life, and sisterhood should give us life. And so I say that as we reflect and rethink, what has sisterhood looked like and how do we reassess that it can be moving forward in the midst? I'm sure during the pandemic, we have been able to see who calls on us, who supports us, who do we lean on in times of disaster. It's so important to recognize that these are moments that we will remember and take with a lifetime on how pandemics truly can create pivotal points in our life to rethink our sense of purpose and who do we call the people, the tribe, the sisterhood that we rely on in this moment. Now Next, food mood connection, and I'll make the connection on all of this. When it comes to the food mood connection, as I shared earlier, there were alcohol consumption running high, people looking to self-medicate when it's time of disaster. There's a great book called Power and Force, and I had the privilege that was written by a psychiatrist, David Hawkins. I learned about it from practicing yoga, and I understood that through the process of assessing leaders around the world, from looking at low energy as shame to high energy as love, that I started to think the mindset of what experiences create shame in the body, fear, guilt, anger, versus peace, love, joy. How does that ultimately impact the way in which we look at food and look at relationships? And so I saw food became really an extension of how we see ourselves and how we feel about ourselves. And what I mean by this is, in the midst of the pandemic, I've definitely have baked my share of cookies. And because of that, I began to think, am I eating out of my discomfort? Am I trying to self-soothe? All these questions are so relevant at a time in which we're not able to fully connect to everyone around us that we love and care for. And so food becomes a form of comfort. And so thinking about foods that spoke to love was like colorful, vibrant, fresh. Things like salads, smoothies. I began having that self-awareness and taking the action of balancing my mood and food, because they're all connected. Because just like a light switch, food turns on and food turns off because it's part of the environment inside of our bodies. And so if we have that self-awareness, it can be powerful in how we think about moving through this life. And just some examples of the impact of these foods that I speak of. So we have food for the brain, and we have two different forms of food and the impact it can have. Everything from saturated fats that you see in foods that I call fried, laid to the side, the trans fats that people fought to ban, down to having, trace minerals in our food items. And we're so sometimes not aware of the impact of the pots and the pans that we use and how they play into the nutrition process of our foods, but they do. So I always say the produce, the preparation, the products, they all matter in the end in how it shapes the health of the dish that you eat on your plate. So ways in which you can protect. We also saw in the midst of the pandemic, a lot of beans being bought and eaten. I definitely had more beans in the last 90 days than I had in a whole year. I don't know what prompted it, but part of it was obviously affordability. Beans are cheap. They're good for you, high in fiber, and they also help protect the brain. Along with other antioxidant foods like blueberries and berries, I've made enough different smoothies and dishes involving strawberries, berries, any kind of berry, grapes. I definitely ate while also managing price. Sometimes the grapes got shelved, too expensive. But the green leafies, definitely a winner. Everything from the high calcium, the fiber, the vitamin K, depending on if you're on heart meds, you have to balance that out. But the greens, definitely a foundation and good for the brain, along with the sweet potatoes. I definitely had a lot of those as well. And I say this because fruits and vegetables are our defenders for life and for our brains. And I supplement that with taking more of a prenatal vitamin C, prenatal vitamin. No, I'm not pregnant, but they actually offer a good balance of vitamins and minerals that are really good for women, especially if you're still premenopausal. And so food became crucial because sometimes I had the sleep issues with staying up late, Netflixing, not having the ability to sleep. And I definitely wasn't getting out to the park to exercise. And so I knew I needed to put more energy into what was my superpower, and that was knowledge about nutrition. And so if you felt any of that, please share in the chats. What have you been experiencing around just managing your food mood connections? What moods have you been in? Have you been aware and reflective of what you've been experiencing? And then inflammation in the body. Inflammation when we're stressed comes in many different forms. I know I feel it in my shoulder blades, in my deltoids, in my neck. And so a massage would be excellent. And so it's understanding that inflation and the diet that we eat all is connected as well, just as much as the ability to exercise is a great way to reduce stress. So I highlight some of the different systems. From our muscle systems, like I said, the tension that I feel, the GI, primal brain, definitely the first indicator of just imbalance in the body that we may feel. And we also have the skin, as I shared, the fibromyalgia, whether it's eczema or psoriasis, your skin, if you literally have issues flaking up in your skin, that's your body telling you something, and we should listen. Okay, we have in the chat, I normally am not a sweet person, but I've been eating more sweets during the pandemic. Amen. And my sleep patterns have been off, and I'm not sleeping well. So I want to offer some suggestions to this, and we'll get into that later. But I do want to just share some recommendations that I've done to help eliminate that issue, or at least reduce. I find counting, doing deep breaths multiple times helps to relax the vagus nerve, and it gives me comfort for me to sleep. Also, I felt a need to, I became super mindful of like the air that I'm breathing, especially with COVID-19. And so I bought an essential oil diffuser and put in lavender because it's known to create calm into the body. And then I also, having a child with a history of asthma, was mindful of air since we're like trapped inside for 90 days. And so I bought a really good air purifier online. And so I smelled the difference in the air. And up until this time, never felt the need because we were in and out. But when you're in one location for a long period of time, low air circulation, I said, now's a good time to make that investment. Also, another attendee says, I noticed a better mood when I eat more fish, of course, because of DHA, definitely. And trying different kinds of fish, exactly. So I typically am big on salmon, but yes, I love other kinds of fish as well. And so that's always good to use creativity and variety as the key ingredients in the kitchen. And Michelle shares, sisterhood is about love, compassion for ourselves and others. Definitely. So foods that fight inflammation. I wish we could have foods that fight inflation, but I would just share some of the anti-inflammation foods. And this really speaks to high antioxidants to help fight off free radicals that are prompted to create more cancer in the body that can metastasize. And so lycopene in tomatoes, the vitamins that you'll find in a lot of the citrus fruits, like oranges. I remember we ate so many oranges. It was just so easy to peel like eatable snacks in the afternoon. And strawberries and berries and cherries. Yes, especially the frozen to just throw in for a smoothie and mix. And tons of nuts. It's like, how many different ways can we have healthy snacks? But unlike my grandma, the nuts were not dipped in oil and salt. So we would buy the unsalted nuts and walnuts shaped like a brain, big clue, good for the brain. And lots of almonds. And definitely you can still eat peanuts. pecans, so many great nuts out there. And so especially if you're not allergic, definitely take advantage of them. And for the oils, olive oil is great, but it should not be cooked at high temps. So just be mindful of the smoking point and the different oils in which you use. And then also for the leafy greens, we have spinach and kale and collards. The Holy Trinity I grew up with was mustard, turnip, and collard greens. But they typically was overcooked. You had the pot liquor juice that people did not drink, which we now know, especially in nutrition, that the nutrients are leaked in the juice and why you sop it over the cornbread or eat it with beans. I mean, it's so many different ways in which you could have remixed that pot liquor. So this is the part of the learning process. And then we just talked about the salmon and other fish that are fatty, are rich in EPA and DHA. So how many of us have heard the expression, I am too blessed to be stressed? Let us know in the chat section. Amen. Yes, too blessed. But who is actually living by this? I mean, how many times have we actually said, you know what, today I'm not going to go on social media and bless her with my words. You know, just bless her in your heart. Just God, just bless her heart and pray. But unfortunately, it has been used as a digital space of trolls and ways in which people attack. And that is why we shared earlier, we want our digital spaces as safe as our physical spaces. And how can we do that? So we do that with intentionality and a mindset, and we do that through everyday intentional practice. And so where the mind goes, the body follows. And so if your mind is not thinking positively, your actions will reflect that. So we want to be truly mindful of when we say bless you, we want to bless you and not stress you. Because my goal in life has been, how do we create more blessings and not a burden? Now, as I just shared, when you are stressed, what is stress backwards? Desserts, yes. And like I said, this was the finished product of multiple versions of cookies that I made over the course. So if you were like me, whether you were making cookies or buying them, what were the different desserts in which you were diving into and eating? Please share into the chat as well. I look forward to hearing. And so comments were, yes, amen. Now, I had to get creative, and part of the justification of eating the cookies were, if I'm making them, I make a healthy version of them. You know, like I'm not using the bleach flour. I'm using, you know, whole grain flour. I am making sure we have nuts because that's good for the brain. I'm not using white sugar. I'm using other forms of sweetener. I'm using, you know, making vegan cookies. I'm just making a variety of ways in which I can still have that sweetness and not have the guilt with it. And so we have cookies, brownies, muffins, yes. Tiramisu, chocolate cookies, yes, exactly. So, and I thought I was saving money, and it was a way in which the children have a taste of love through the cookie, but also through the other meals that I made. So eating for self-care versus eating to our graves. That's what we're all about here. How are we rethinking what does eating and the relationship to self-care look like? Because for so long, how many agree that we've been eating because food has looked like fuel, just like in a car? It just comes, it goes, whether it's now getting the unleaded or the premium, you know, I'm guilty. I'm just doing unleaded. But if we were to do that with our food every day, just buying the same kind of products, no variety, fried diet laid to the side, we're not drinking water. If we are, we're justifying saying soda has water in it, so what's the problem? How long can you really go on a diet like that and have a quality of life and quantity of life? That really is the question. So I want to ask, what does self-care mean to you? For me, self-care, as I shared, was this idea that my existence truly is the resistance. And therefore, how does the way in which I see the world, navigate, use food, use a form of walking, building sisterhood, how is that all reflected and connected together? And so please share, what does self-care mean to you? I want to hear you share because it's going to be really important. And as you're doing that, I just want to take a quick highlight for those in which who are gardeners to be, what are some of the benefits of growing food and how that's another form of self-care. Connecting to earth, connecting to creating your own foods is one way to build altruism and a better sense of understanding of what it takes to grow food and eat. And so by doing so, it can be more nutritious. You get the vitamin D from the sun, from being outside. And when you're growing your food, you can create more diverse and healthy diets that's going to be diverse in the nutrition content as well. And you save money, and it's another form of activity. And it's just overall better from the earth with no packaging, as we've seen enough Netflix docuseries that teaches us the importance of reducing our waste, whether it's food waste or plastic waste. Very important. So we have next, one quick way in which you can start a garden is just an herbal garden. You can buy an herbal kit online easily, or you can go to your local hardware store and buy one. And so these are just some sample of herbs that you can start off with, whether it's oregano, dill, parsley, chives, sage. What's not here, lavender, to make some lavender lemonade, and thyme. So there are so many different ways you can use herbs that it's not just garnish on a plate, but actually cooking it into the foods. And it's so healthy for you as well, because a lot of the herbs helps with like microbes and just antifungal, antimicrobial, which is really important. So shares self-care means a healthy brain, physical and spiritual health. Exactly. And we have taking time to check your mental space, connect to your ancestors, and give thanks and gratitude. Do something for yourself and nature, caring for oneself, most definitely. And the self-care means taking care of yourself first. You're not being selfish, but to help others, you have to feel about yourself mentally and physically. Most definitely. And so having that concept of self-care as a guiding light is reflective in thinking, how do we connect to others around us in creating self-care? And self-care is centering yourself, most definitely. Because if you're living in an urban environment, you have sirens, firecrackers popping off at night, sometimes in the day, and being able to take a break, whether it's a trip just 2 hours away into the woods, get a cabin, a B&B, whatever, is a great way to center yourselves. And if you can't do that, how do you create that environment just within your own home is very important. So I want to talk about, what does self-care look like in your family and your friend circle? This is a reflective moment of the legacy, whether that's functional or dysfunctional. What has that looked like? You know, from the images of the 1950s of women who use wine to self-medicate, from being trapped in an identity and in a social environment that reduce the concept of the role of women. That might cause you to drink. When you think about Black women from an intersectional view at that time who not only had those limitations, but also could easily be physically assaulted and not have any justice. How do you self-care in that, with that trauma? Or if you have the family member who is known as a perpetrator and assaults, whether it's violating family members or it's violating people in the community, how do you deal with that? So these are real issues when we think about what does self-care look like? Or working in environments that taps your nerves and cause weathering in your telomeres. What does self-care look like? How have you seen that in your own family and how your mother, your grandmother, your aunts navigated those spaces, and especially for Black women? So I say this because the legacy in which we learn, we unintentionally extend in our consciousness. And so what pact have we made to ourselves to break that cycle, to shift to self-care, and to understand that that is a form of thriving while others could not and were just surviving. And so we have my mom, my grandma didn't do much self-care exactly. And I want to show my daughter a better example. Most definitely. And that's the other important role, particularly as mothers. We have an opportunity to show what does self-care should look like. But that means sometimes having other people to role model that behavior for you if you have not been able to see it for yourself. Can anyone share who is this woman in this photo right now? Any guess? Bingo, exactly. Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks, exactly. You might have seen a book has been written about Rosa Parks. And on these digital streets, the image has been floating around about her practicing yoga. And did you know in the 1970s, she also became a vegetarian? Yes. And so for some who may know or not, a vegetarian is someone who does not eat eggs. No, they eat eggs, they eat cheese, but they, versus the vegan, only eats plants. So you eat byproducts, not the actual product of meat, is the best way to sum it up. So I say this because obviously you had Woodstock happening at the time, what we call the hippie movement, people reconnecting to the earth, but you also have to understand what society was going through. You had just came out of assassinations of MLK, of Malcolm X, JFK, RFK, and you had the civil rights legislation finally passed, and then you had riots. So on a societal level, we needed to self-care. We needed social care. And on a self-care level, if you're riding and boycotting in Montgomery in the South, and for many, that was a whole year of boycotting. The second half of that story that has not been shared is the healing that must come when you go decades of protesting, years, months, weeks of protesting. What does that do to you? You have to refuel for the fight. And so as someone who's had the privilege of chairing the health committee for NAACP, DC branch, that has become crucial in how I think and make this connection between self-care. It's a civil rights issue. Food justice is a civil rights issue. It's all a part of racial justice, a system that was created through social construction, embedded and baked into our policies, and extended throughout all sectors. And so if the system has been built on this concept of supremacy, white male supremacy, and there's a totem pole through that process of how in which, in the pecking order, Black women are at the bottom with Indigenous women, then we have to recognize that that pressure of being at the bottom and others on literally on top of you puts pressure on you and causes what we have, the heart disease as the #1 killer among women in America. So yes, that's a lot of pressure. And so self-care again becomes that form of act of service and also resiliency. And so yes, journaling is another great way because it shows that your story matters. If we talk about our voices must be valued, they also must be documented. And that's really important. I started journaling ever since I was a kid. It was introduced to me by my elementary teacher in English. And I just kept journaling ever since. Because when no one else is willing to listen to you, being able to write, it's almost like a letter to God. Someone is listening to you, and from pen to his ears, the power of prayer with action can create miracles. And so how can sisterhood support self-care? That's the question and the connection. So I want to hear your ideas of what does sisterhood look like? How does self-care can be supported through sisterhood? Because at the end of the day, self-care is crucial, as we just shared, to our existence. And when we know our purpose, it supports that notion even more of why we have to exist. And to have a tribe of others to do that. We have a number of organizations that have made that their mission and focus. WANDA is one, Girl Trek is another. And so to understand that sisterhood has to be reshaped, redefined at a time that we want to go from surviving to thriving. We not only must say it as an individual, but now how do we bake it into our organizations like NCBW as an example? So we have an opportunity to rethink coming out of these protests. How do we translate it into policies, into politics, into programs, into practices that are bled throughout organizations and our cities and our communities? Because we have been away from church and those fried chicken dinners, if you think about it. And we have known for some time that the menu at the church, especially having been formerly of our culinary ministry at my parish, that we would get the questions of, well, what's that in the healthy meal? But no one questions the other food, you know what I mean? And so there's a certain level of education, but it's also another connection to why this food matters. Why do our cultural food matters? And so with WANDA, our focus has been making that connection, making the connection that our food, our sisterhood, they both support and matter. And so I want to dive more into that. One, we have a framework. WANDA is our model. It's W for walking in your wisdom, finding your path, which is crucial. Finding the voice. And not only that, but do you even value your own voice? Because if you do, will you speak up? Will you share it? And if you're in an environment that has disabled your voice, how do you shift to a better environment that enables you to speak and feel heard? And how do you do that with authenticity? When you navigate this space, I remember Oprah once saying, how to live your unvarnished truth. And that stuck with me because so many times we've been living in a space of false self. And how do we now shift to our true selves? I learned that through the process of yoga. And nourishing your creativity. You know, if we begin seeing the garden as a metaphor for life, how do we start planting seeds of hope and not dope? I say dope is doubting other people every day. You know, the people who are dream disablers. They can come in the form of the people you date. It can come in the form of family. It can come in the form of frenemies. Whatever that looks like, how do you then start reshaping and thinking seeds and not weeds in your garden, and seeing your body as a garden? And what do you wish to grow in it? And so D, being determined to overcome all obstacles and rise and resist. We see that. We hear you for those who are marching, rising in the midst of chaos. That is a form of resisting. And to persist and move forward is how we choose to self-care. And in the end, we are actively moving on our path, because not only are we learning, we're doing what we learn. And that is the best form of teacher, is to do what you learn. And that's our framework and how we think about this, and how do we make a movement. So moving forward, we wanted to share that we've focused during this COVID-19 pandemic in creating a series called Cook for the Culture, the Rona edition, where every week in the month of April, we were sharing a platform of other women who are dynamic, fabulous, working in these spaces to help create a sense of health, beauty, and life, affirming practices to teach others, whether that's through food or through mental health or through gardening or through the medical field. So important in how do we shape and create these spaces. And so I say this because we saw a phenomenal outpouring of connecting to these issues, and we saw the need that we needed to continue on this journey of how do we cook for the culture. And when we say cook for the culture, I think we should know cooking is and can be a powerful revolutionary tool. We hear the whole voting with your fork. Well, for us, it's also an extension of, if we're saying that we're wanting to tear down these colonial policies and structures that we AKA call patriarchy or Western imperialism or capitalism, well, that means centering your culture, centering you, your identity, and finding purpose in the concept of decolonization. You know, Juneteenth just passed, but what does emancipation truly look like to be free if we still have a colonized mindset and we still cook like the colonized? Have we truly made these deeper connections? And so we want to dive into that conversation through what we're calling the WANDA Academy. Right now in the District of Columbia, we've seen the numbers of African Americans being 6 times most impacted by COVID-19, lives being lost. If it's not from COVID, it's from corruption, and it's from chronic disease, the 3 C's. And so we want to be able to shift in how we think and make an impact in our communities through the support of partners, and create an online platform for women to be able to engage one another, remix their recipes, heal their meals, restore their health, reclaim their food ways through a community cookbook project. And so if you are a woman, you're in the District of Columbia, and you've been impacted through health disparities, and let's call them out. You got a family of diabetes, my nana. You've had people with depression. You've had heart disease. You've had renal failure. You had a whole host of diseases that you said, my God, if I was equipped with the tools and skills, if I understood the power of food as my medicine, if I knew that my culture mattered in my healing process, if I had a supportive community of sisters and women to support me, if I can extend and build a legacy of love through food to pass on to my children or to my neighbors, if I can build a better relationship with my community, if I can document my story through food, how powerful that could be in the midst of this historic time. And I say that because when COVID-19 happened, it brought me back to 1917, 1918 of the Spanish flu. And I thought to myself, what were the stories of Black women at that time? How were their stories been documented and shared? Were they? We knew some women like Ida B. Wells had a platform, but what about the other countless women that we don't know their names? We know our family's names. My grandmother, Ruby, living in Eufaula, Oklahoma at the time with 10 children. Mother had died, father still running the farm business. And what was life? Where are those stories? And so we, with the use of technology, don't want to miss that opportunity again. And so if you have a friend and you know a woman in the District of Columbia, we want to have a centered space of Black women, and especially those on Medicaid and other health insurances who would not be able to afford support of sisterhood, of being able to take advantage of programs like this. This is a free program because we're offering Food Chiro Freedom Scholarships. We have 50 slots. We start in mid-July. The applications have been pouring in. We want to see your enrollment application today. We will notify those who are accepted within the coming 2 weeks. And we want you to start this journey of being an everyday food hero in your community. Whether you're a mama, auntie, nana, it doesn't matter. You belong here. So go to bit.ly/WANDA 2020. Takes 5 minutes to complete. Very simple. And come and be a part of the WANDA community. Now, any questions? I want to open it up. Please share in the comments if you have any questions about the presentation, about the Academy, about what it means to have any tips or traditions to rethink. We want to hear your ideas, and we want to thank you for being a part of this conversation. And as you type, I just also want to share ways in which to stay connected. So WANDA is on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And if you want to have a conversation, our Calendly link is here below at calendly.com/IamWandaORG. And we also want to just thank NCBW for this opportunity to share this space and be of service and stressing the importance of self-care. A lot of the conversation has focused on obesity, which my weight loss surgeon friend would definitely say is a crucial issue. But I also want to center it back to the way in which the society has been constructed in a very toxic dynamic. Because at the heart of it, if we don't get to the root and we continue to focus on the superficial, we'll never create the change that we want to see. And so we understand that in the work with WANDA, that there are underlying issues and why it's important to have a retraining and rethinking through our sisterhood of what that looks like and how we navigate these spaces and how our intersectionality as Black women matter. Whether you're from Nigeria to Ghana to Tanzania to South Africa to Kenya to Egypt to Uganda to Congo to the Caribbean and Jamaica and Haiti, we're all a part of a global Black women's community from farm to health. Every day we interact with food, and we want you to be more empowered in how in which you see your relationship with food and to be able to advocate for a better system starting in our own homes, in our own communities. And so we have a few comments that came in just sharing health is important. And how can organizations like NCBW, support WANDA and our work? That's a great question. We definitely have had a number of people purchase Where's WANDA books. We had definitely an outpouring of donations over the last few weeks. Some have trickled down from just the nature of media cycles. But I would say going forward and how we can build a sisterhood of organizations that support one another, which is what we're doing today, is one, creating platforms like this an opportunity to be able to connect and present and share, recognizing that we all have core competencies and we all have unique skills and God-given talents that help extend. So one, the invitation to speak and give voice is one way, whether it's in your organization, definitely in these digital spaces compared to physical right now, and then also donations in the form of being a part of a program, a grant opportunity to collaborate, or individual donations, institutional ones, and then supporting the programs, whether it's telling a friend, sharing the link, have you heard of this organization, this would be great for you to get involved. We're still young, we're still growing, we have a lot of wonderful ideas and how we, even as a small organization, help to amplify voices better than how we have in the past. And so we have focused a lot on what other organizations need to do. Even as a Black woman organization, we recognize the importance of how we can do an even better job of using our platforms to amplify the voices of more women. So I want to just wrap up and want to thank you again. And if you want to connect with me on social media, I do want to also share that you can also check out Cooking with Soul, which is a new series that we are doing with the U.S. Botanic Garden. The first episode dropped last week on Juneteenth, and we have another one just in time for 4th of July. So you can go to usbg.gov/cooking to see the okra and tomatoes episode. We'll be highlighting cultural plant-friendly dishes. So if you are, like Rosa, a vegetarian, you will approve. If you are vegan, you will approve. So I do hope that you tune in and you can definitely support and provide. We can provide an opportunity to make health easy for you and still keep your culture, your identity intact. So let's stay connected on social media. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I thank you again for being a part of today's conversation. Please share. It is on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Tambra Raye. And I'll reshare on our platforms. But it's been an honor and a joy to be here. Since it is a Saturday, self-care Saturday, I'm definitely going to take myself outside and get some vitamin D. And I hope you do as well. As in the end, I hope we are more of a blessing than a burden, and especially to ourselves when the world may not always see us. I see you and you are loved. So thank you again. Take care.